Today, we will be analyzing the North Middlesex Regional School District's MCAS data. The North Middlesex School District is a public school district that services 3 towns. There are 6 schools across the 3 towns that service 2,764 students from preschool to 12th grade. I am analyzing Spalding Memorial School's data, which has 335 students across grades 2 to 4. Approximately 82.1 of those students are white, while 17.9 of them are of minority races. It has an average class size of 21.6 students, which is above the average states, which is 17.2 students. There are 44.5% of Spalding's students are high needs, while 3.6% are English language learners, 7.2% are their first language is not English, 27.8 of them are low income, and 23% of them are students with disabilities. As I began analyzing Spalding's MCAS data, I started with grade 3 and found that in both math and ELA, the students were above the state average. But then when you moved to grade 4, that changed, and in both math and ELA, the students were below the state average. This was pretty interesting because when you look through the cohorts from 24 to 2025, you see that the same students who were exceeding expectations, or at least meeting expectations, were now having a majority of them only partially meeting or not meeting the expectation. So here is some specific data for 3rd and 4th grade cohorts from 2024 to 2025. So as we can see in the brown columns, the ELA columns, in 2024, the 3rd graders were 3% of them were exceeding, 46% were meeting, while as in 2025, while they were in 4th grade, 0% were exceeding and only 31% were meeting. And that's the same for math. So in 2024, while the students were in 3rd grade, only 8% of them were exceeding expectations and 53% were meeting expectations. And then when they moved to 4th grade in 2025, only 1% were exceeding expectations and only 38% were meeting expectations. That is quite a big jump. I also wanted to take that data and compare it to the state. So these are the 3rd grade graphs, and what I really want to focus on are the blue and the green sections, so the exceeding expectation section and the meeting expectation. And as you can see, for in ELA, which is the top graphs, Spalding was doing great in 3rd grade. They were far exceeding the state levels for meeting expectations, and also for math, they were exceeding the expectation there as well. Between state and Spalding, they were doing fantastic in both ELA and math in 3rd grade. Now, when we switch to 4th grade, the graphs look much different. Whereas before, the green and the blue sections were larger than the orange and red, now we see the majority of orange and red, especially from Spalding's data, which means that most students are either only partially meeting the expectation or they're not meeting the expectation. We can see quite a big jump between both the math and the ELA between Spalding's numbers and the state averages, which means that Spalding's 4th graders really need to work more on both ELA and math to get those numbers up. As I looked through the data, I found plenty of successes. So this top box here is 3rd grade. So for on the ELA MCAS, 3rd grade did well with parts of speech, compound words, and points of view. And then this bottom box is talking about 4th grade. So they did very well with making inferences, finding the meaning of words, and finding key details when it was related to the topic of a passage. There were also plenty of successes in the math portion of the MCAS. So again, the top box is talking about 3rd grade. 3rd graders did well with patterns, time, and word problems. And then the bottom box talks about 4th grade. They did well with subtraction, comparing decimals, and rounding whole numbers. Though we did find successes, there were also plenty of weaknesses. So for third grade, they had a very strong weakness in writing, and then they also struggled in finding character info in a text. And then in fourth grade, again, the writing, they also struggled. And then they also struggled with identifying details that support a lesson learned in a story. So really finding those main points of the passage, and then also writing an essay that describes the relationship between two characters. So in this one, they had to use details from the story to as evidence as they were writing, and that is something that they struggled with. On the third grade math MCAS, students struggled a lot with identifying right angles. So this is where they were given some shapes and they had to figure out if the shape had right angles or not. In fourth grade, our students really struggled with finding the perimeter of a rectangle and then also angle measurements regarding circles. So they were given an angle measurement and asked to identify the correct statement about the part of a circle the angle turns through. And that is something that they heavily struggled on. So now we get to the action plan portion. So we'll start with ELA. The first action I'd like to see is to improve writing scores across both grade levels. So to do this, I'd like to see us start collecting and analyzing writing samples and then use those to find a common weakness throughout. Then we can use that weakness to create targeted lessons, and then we always love to provide practice opportunities to all students. And then as the year goes on, we can repeat these steps as needed. The next action I would like to see is to improve passage knowledge. So the ability to really find those details and pull them out to use them as evidence. To do this, we could create lessons around finding important information in a passage, assess the way students prove what they're saying is true about a passage, and then create professional development opportunities focused on answering questions about a passage. So, really figure out what we need to teach our students in order to meet these expectations. So, most of these are ongoing things, except for that professional development. I'd like to see that happen right at the beginning of the year. As for math, the I would like to see improvement with measurement and data scores across both levels. So, some ways we could do this would be to collect and analyze math assessments involving angle knowledge, as that's something that they were struggling in both third grade and fourth grade. We could also provide professional development focused on visuals, maybe some mnemonic aids used for measurement and data, and some geometry too that can be helpful for perimeter. And then number three, create lessons which allow for modeling, guided practice, group practice, and individual practice. I think a lot of students really learn from watching and working as a group, so providing those opportunities will be important. Most of these, again, are ongoing. I'd like to see it happen throughout the year, but that professional development, again, I'd like to see happen at the beginning of the year. Thank you for your time.